Welcome back to AI Meets API. Our host, Ajay Konda, CGO of Prawasoft, sits down with Sumit Bafna. Sumit's been with MuleSoft for over 10 years and has pretty much seen it all, from core engineering to customer success to solutions engineering. He is now serving as Global Field CTO. That mix of experience gives him a unique perspective on how companies can actually make integration work in the real world. Over to you, Ajay.
Hey, thanks, Amy. Hey, Sumit, excited to have you here. So we
Pleasure.
spoke lot in the offline. Yeah, good to talk to you in this podcast. And first things first, your role is something intriguing to not only to me, many people. We have Prashant here before, and David also. So, what exactly the field CTO? And the second one is, how did your career evolve into the field CTO? And I'm sure we come across a couple of places, TIPCO, MuleSoft. So yeah, like to hear your journey to the field CTO.
Thank you, Ajay. Uh, the, primarily, the job of a field CTO is essentially helping our customers understand what MuleSoft's vision as a company is. So we align very closely with the product organization, understand where the product is headed, and help our customers adapt and adopt the evolving landscape as far as all things MuleSoft and Salesforce is concerned, but more importantly, also understanding major industry trends for the respective industries that we are in. I've recently been elevated to a global position, which means that I'm responsible for not just the Americas business, but, or individual OUs or organization units, but more broadly, all of MuleSoft across the globe. I talk to customers across the globe, understand what their needs are, help our product understand what our customers' needs are, so that the product evolves accordingly. And at the same time, big part of my job is keeping our customers up to date in terms of how the product is evolving so that they can accordingly evolve their roadmap as well. So it's a confluence between bringing product further and then bringing customers further so that there's synergy between the two.
That's exciting.
Yeah. As far as the journey is concerned, it has been a long and blissful journey. Been here 10 years. I have seen everything MuleSoft. I remember when I started at this company, we were less than 100 employees, and been through all, seen it all, saw the IPO, and then in relatively short terms saw the acquisition, and have since then have become part of the larger Salesforce family. It has been exciting. The company has evolved, the product has evolved dramatically, and it has kept pace with the evolution of the industry itself, which is something I think we'll talk about at length. APIs is what we were doing 2 years ago. About 5 years ago, before that, we were doing ESB, and from the ESB to API evolution was radical but interesting. And now we are again at this very pivotal point as a company where we are pivoting from being an API company evolving into an AI connectivity company. Evolution is part of what this company has seen, and I'm extremely excited to have been part of that evolution over years.
Okay, that's great to hear. Yeah, definitely, I've seen your growth. One thing everybody's top of everybody's mind is agentic. From the world of integration, how do you see agentic, and what kind of things customers are talking about or asking about you about agentic?
It's very interesting around how the world itself has evolved in the last 2.5 years, I would say. When the first version of GPT came out, uh, the mindset was, you know, you have a massive data lake, and all of your data is going to reside in this massive data lake, and this source of data, your source of data lake can be public internet, it can be whatever it can be, right? And people thought now that all the data that an organization would own is going to coalesce. What would be the need for integration? And we have seen it evolve very rapidly for larger organizations to understand that their data is going to be siloed, right? So we would always have systems of records within your organization where silos are going to exist. Sure, data will move from silos to wherever you are going to do generative and agentic things on top of, but sometimes the time it would take for the data to move itself is going to be so long that you would miss out on business opportunities. That is what makes integration extremely relevant in today's day and age, and it also makes integration extremely central to all things agentic. So while agents and the underlying models themselves, the underlying generative models themselves will do analysis based on historical data that is it has been fed with, they often would end up in situations where the historical analysis would need to be fed with real-time insights. And that's where the real-time insights part, powered by integration, is going to marry closely together with the wider agentic landscape. What's also, so that's part one of how the traditional integration world influences the agentic. Where we have also seeing a lot of energy being put in, and this has been one of our largest conversation points with the customers is, okay, you're bringing data into the agents, but there is no such thing as a single agent. There would not be a thing as a single agent. When you see systems like Workday, for example, Workday will have its own set of agents doing Workday agent stuff. And you will see things like, HCM will have its own set of agent stuff. You are starting to see in the industry an evolving need for these specialized agents to talk to each other as well. And that surfaces a new opportunity for organizations like MuleSoft to be integration not only between data repositories and agents, but also agents and agents. And that's a unique need that I think a vast majority of our customers have been asking us about is not only how do you bring data to my agent's source of truth, but how do you essentially bring agents together themselves effectively in a way that your data lineage is maintained and your data consistency is maintained, and you're also able to audit, log, and trace, and also source or identify the decision making criteria when one agent passes control to the other. And that's a unique opportunity, I think, that a lot of integration tools, as you look at the wider ecosystem, the ones that capitalize on the agent to agent interaction part are going to be the integration tools of the future. Whereas, Ajay, you and I, we both come from a legacy TIPCO background. What would become legacy and what would become an integration tool of the future? The ability to capitalize and do a better job with agent to agent connectivity, governance, auditability, those would be the defining factors for an integration tool of future.
Few follow-up questions on this, but they will be more related to the product. Let me jump onto the customer side first, and then I will get onto the product side. So on the customer side, right, one industry we spoke previously is about regulated industries offline, right? So the most of the agent or AI right now is probabilistic, right? But regulated industry is one which always looks for the deterministic responses or outcomes, right? What kind of discussions are happening, how you are helping them to make it, or is this anything MuleSoft is playing to make it more deterministic?
Great question, Ajay. So yes, you're spot on, and I think it's the nature of the industry itself that has created this inherent differentiation on what the agentic toolset can provide and what a large bank or a large insurance company or a large healthcare company can do. Right? When you ask the same question to the same agent twice, in the agentic world, you might have two different answers, which is usually not an acceptable thing in the regulated space.
Yes.
There are a few ways we are addressing this. So there might be internal facing use cases that these larger regulated industries customers have, things like surfacing knowledge to their internal employees, things like knowledge repositories, for example, contact center resolution, all the things that might be internal to an organization itself, where a degree of probabilisticness is okay. It's absorbable, right? When things are tested right, it's more or less absorbable. Even with that, with the evolution of industry, you're starting to see that things like scorecards. So when one agent invokes another agent, the confidence score saying, I am providing you this response, but I'm 59% certain that this response is accurate, or I'm 93% certain that I have invoked the right agent downstream, that is starting to build a lot of confidence. And honestly, what I see long term this industry evolving towards is, as you look at the use case itself, the regulations will turn out to become that, if you have a certain probabilistic score, only then accept response. And if you're lower than a certain probabilistic threshold, then take a step back. I'm not going to surface that response at all. I might default to some sort of deterministic outcome in some way, shape, or form. So that's one way of looking at it. What's also helping, and this is primarily from the MuleSoft perspective, is we are using agentic behavior at design time. So, and what I mean when I say that is, when I actually am designing my agent based on the actions that I'm defining for my agent, at the time of building the agent, I'm surfacing a few probabilistic APIs that an agent can probably invoke, right? At the design time itself, I will pick the most appropriate API for the most appropriate use case or the most appropriate question resolution, and then surface information based on that. The runtime determinism of which API to invoke based on what question is an area where regulated industries are still far behind, and it is going to take them time to catch up. But in the meanwhile, as far as the design time aspects are concerned, we still have an opportunity, and we have been playing very heavily on the regulated side, or MuleSoft has been, as far as providing design time, ease of API access, ease of decision making. If your organization has 10,000 APIs, if I'm able to shortlist 3, which might be invocable in the right time, that's still going to be a huge efficiency driver for a regulated customer. So these are some of the things that we are doing until regulations are defined. Focus on the design time side of things and efficiencies from a design time perspective. If you're looking at runtime, look at use cases that are not driven by regulations. That's going to be important. And then lastly, do as much auditing and as much logging as possible, so that over time the model learns based on the audit logs and communication traces and lineage, etc. Your system learns over time so that it can improve in future iteration. That's also going to be a very defining part that would help regulated customers evolve over time.
That's very interesting. A couple of follow-up questions on this. First one is current LLMs are giving that probabilistic score, or is this something in progress?
Yeah, that's a great question. LLMs inherently are capable of giving you some sort of probabilistic marking. So as far as the scorecard is concerned, not all of them are. Claude does a relatively better job than OpenAI does as far as probabilistic scoring is concerned, or scorecard is concerned. It is up to the integration engines themselves using the right set of tools from your LLM APIs themselves to surface some of this information out. So to answer your question, some LLMs are doing a better job than the others, but the not so great part is most agentic frameworks are not exploring it as heavily. So work is necessary on the LLM side, but work is also necessary on the agentic toolset side to make this information more apparent to its consumers.
Okay, sounds good. Another question I have is, what does this agentic orchestration means? So right now, if you see, one of the things I spoke earlier with some of the guests is about the dynamic workflow, right? So far we have used to this static workflows
Design.
and building the design time. We also spoke about how do we test this new design agentic flows. What are the changes you are seeing, or how people are adopting these agentic workflows?
So the concept is relatively new. Adoption, we are starting to see, at least on our customer base side, we are starting to see certain early adopters who are partnering very closely with our product, with our engineering, to understand and even make sense of how to use agentic orchestration more effectively. All it contains, not just all it contains, some of the key elements that it contains is a semantic routing layer, which based on semantics, based on natural human language definitions, having an understanding of what an agent downstream can and cannot do. So if there's like a conversational agent that you chat with, a chatbot agent, that needing to talk with headless agents who don't have a chat experience of its own, but are capable of interacting with other agents. In a scenario like this, what would these headless agent be capable of doing? Clearly defining that, and that definition along with the registry is part of the orchestration layer itself. So all the agents that might exist in your ecosystem, along with clear definitions of what they can do, clear definitions of how you can access them, because agent security also becomes important, right? So authentication, authorization of agents, all of that is fed into something called an agent registry. So agent registry will maintain all of that information for you. The orchestration layer, based on the question asked and based on the information, semantic information and the routing information available in agent registry, would make the determination which downstream headless agent to invoke. And that is what would bring together what we call the concept of an agent fabric, right? So the orchestration layer helps you create a fabric where you have a singular or a few conversational agents. So if you go to the API-led world, you could call them experience agents, conversational agents, more or less. The orchestration layer would more or less act like a process orchestrator, more or less process API loosely, well, not exactly the same, but loosely it is way more than that. And then your headless agent more or less acting like agents against individual systems, bringing the orchestration together.
Okay, that's good. In this thought you shared, where does the MCP sits in? Is it in this registry, or that's one thing? Where does MCP place? That's catching up a lot of attention. And the second question is, what are the best practices around MCP? When to use MCP, or when to use MCP to invoke API, or directly use API? How do you decide from a registry point of view?
That's a very interesting question, especially around MCP best practices. That's very important to look at. So industry has been playing with it in a few different ways. We have a set of best practices and criteria defined based on what we have observed. So MCP was put together by Anthropic primarily. So the founders of Cloud put it together, made it open source. I think what was it, 7 or 8 months, maybe a year ago.
Yeah, less than a year.
And Mule was among the first organizations that understood the power of MCP. Um, from when Anthropic originally put it together, the idea was to use what they call MCP tools for both agent to API interactions as well as agent to agent interactions. I think, and kudos to the product leadership on the MuleSoft side. I think we recognized it quite early. Is MCP is best suited for agent to API interaction, is best done using MCP. As far as agent to agent interactions are concerned, there are a few other protocols that become much better suited. A2A is one of those. A2A is extremely powerful as far as agent to agent conversations concerned. A2A was put together and then made open source by Google. Similar to A2A, or somewhere in between A2A and MCP, is what we call ACP as well, or Agentic Context Protocol. That's also becoming more relevant, and then ACP essentially has an MCP-like functionality, less peer-to-peer, more client-server, but it sits at the agent-to-agent layer, more or less. So it does what A2A does in a very MCP-like protocol. Now, where does MCP sit was your next question. In our minds, MCP as MCP servers exposing MCP capability as tools are going to best sit not in the agent registry. Agent registry is where your discoverable agents should reside. MCPs themselves are best built on top of APIs. So you have a bunch of APIs put together, your order status API, for example, which might be built on top of NetSuite, or your lead API, which might be built on top of Salesforce, or you might have some system API built on top of a database server, right? Those capabilities are best exposed using MCP tools. So you will have one or more MCP server where you would define which API exists, how to invoke that API, authentication, authorization mechanisms associated with those APIs, and a natural human language descriptor around each endpoint in that API, right? Why is that useful? At that point of time, either your conversational agent or an headless agent. So you might have an agent on top of Workday. If this Workday agent wants to talk to Workday itself, the underlying data layer on the Workday side, it can potentially do so using MCP. So the underlying data repository can be made available using MCP. The agent, which is the headless agent, can talk to the systems using it will become an MCP client. The exposition on top of your backend system would become the MCP server, and that's how they will actually seamlessly communicate. The good part is you don't need to write, get method, with put method, post method, none of that. On the agent side, all you're going to say, I need certain capability or certain data unlocked. In natural human language, you're going to describe it. Because of the fact that in MCP tools, there are mechanisms to understand natural language, it will be able to understand which API to invoke and surface information upstream. So that's what MCP is primarily for, and this is how we've envisioned it too, is primarily agent to API interaction. So agent needed to bring information from APIs in real time is what MCP is going to do for you. And now, as far as the conversational agent to the your headless agents is concerned, that's where A2A primarily from MuleSoft perspective, A2A is central. Hopefully, at some point of time in future, ACP will also come into picture, and ACP is going to operate at that semantic layer or at the agent registry layer.
Okay, sounds good. So there was
Now,
some discussions around that MCP is going to replace API. Is it really true, or how do you see it? From the explanation which you have given is more like MCP is going to more of a facilitator between the APIs and the agents.
yeah. Now, I should never use the word never, but in the near future, I don't see MCP becoming a replacement for an API. And the reason why I say that is, at least in the near foreseeable future, you would still have a need where systems are going to talk to systems, where there is not going to be any agent at all. Ajay, what we also have to keep in mind is agents are extremely expensive. The amount of compute and the LLM tokens that a simple resolution can take can be cost prohibitive sometimes. When you know for a fact that you do not need probabilistic reasoning, when you know for a fact that if something then this, else something then this, else this, in those kind of scenarios, while agents can still do that, it's cost prohibitive to do so because you have less expensive mechanisms available in a deterministic fashion, which can help you resolve scenarios like these. So if you have a predefined workflow where step by step in the workflow is already predefined, there is no reason for you to go down the agentic route. Our advice for you would be to still stick to the workflow route and still have APIs interact with each other. It will just be too expensive to go down the MCP route for that. So that's one guidance is you would, in the near foreseeable future, you would still have needs where systems would need to talk to systems directly, or you might still have a need where a simple orchestration workflow which does not require non-deterministic outcomes. It's clearly defined step after step by step, outcome defined. They needing to resolve something, they would still go down the API route directly. And that's just how the cost dynamics would work. The other side to it is, I think you alluded upon it, is in that case, MCP is helping expose APIs to agents. That's essentially the intention is. Like you have exchange that you and I as human readers, or an API catalog, or a WSDL had, what did we have back then? UDDI,
Yeah.
long time ago,
Yeah.
where a human being can actually read through UDDI and figure out what SOAP API or REST API using an API catalog could invoke. The idea is that if an agent needs to invoke the same set of capabilities, MCP is going to help fill in that gap. Now, we also need to keep in mind that a lot of LLMs are notorious, horribly notorious at making things up. When they don't find a good answer, when they don't understand what a good answer might be, they hallucinate and they make things up at that point of time. If an API is not well documented, if an API in the ecosystem does not follow standards and best practices from a documentation perspective, from a completeness perspective, from a thoroughness perspective, our advice would be you rather not expose them as MCP tools, because an ill-defined documented API would lead to LLM hallucinating. An LLM would not be able to read through the documentation, so it will make assumptions. When it make assumptions, it will invoke an API that it probably should not have invoked. And that would lead to chances of error. Which is why API governance, so we are talking about AI governance, which is necessary, but API governance itself becomes extremely central, because without API governance, you're then exposing LLM to things that it might hallucinate on top of.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, definitely. That's a big concern. Just one curious question here. I know that agents consume the tokens from LLMs. Does MCP also consume the tokens?
I mean, the resolution. So hosting an MCP service does not consume any tokens, right? It's just a listener. But for an agent to invoke MCP, it would need to do reasoning to figure out which MCP to invoke, right? And then MCP goes downstream. That reasoning part is done by LLM, which will consume tokens.
How about if it is APIs? does it consume, or it is more of if then else statements?
If it is APIs, then there is no tokens involved, right? If it is APIs talking to APIs, then there are no tokens involved because it's just if then else, very deterministic. The path is already defined, it's going on a defined path.
Okay, yeah, that's very good input.
It's the
And
reasoning. It's easiest way to think about it is like someone's brain power is being consumed. If a developer has used their brain power to define a deterministic path, then no token consumption. Our brain tokens are consumed. Whereas if a developer has not been able to resolve it and it is leaving it on machine to figure out what the reasoning should be and which API to invoke, that's consuming heuristics, that's consuming a machine's computational capabilities. That's where the tokens get consumed.
okay, yeah, this makes really good sense. Yeah, we get excited whenever we are seeing a lot of this technical evaluation, but once you put cost to it, then you will see the real
Was
picture
very
of it.
interesting.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's that. Honestly, that leads to a very interesting path. We have a few specialists on our team. By the way, you should talk to Victoria. She's phenomenal on our team. Idea for our next podcast should be outside the deterministic world as well. We are seeing a broad misuse of agents in scenarios where just natural human language processing, NLP processing is sufficient. So things like language translation, if you were to use an agent to do it, agent will do a phenomenal job at doing natural language translation. But is it appropriate? No, it's extremely cost prohibitive. NLP as a domain has existed, which takes significantly less CPU cycles, significantly more cost efficient, and specializes in language translations or understanding of language. So if the intent is only understanding language or translating language, then NLP or natural language processing is a much better mechanism than agent is. And there's a lot of material that we are now putting together in terms of when would NLP be appropriate versus when would an agent consuming AI tokens would be more appropriate. I think a lot of agentic frameworks themselves, if they can create a pathway where they can make a determination of when should they do LLM versus when should they do NLP, that would be a big win for customers across the board.
That's an interesting thing, because whenever we are building something right now, we are only looking at the cloud costs or the V codes or the flows, how much is getting consumed right now. Going forward, we have to look at more like a runtime consumption of the tokens and things. That will be an interesting and thing to consider for all your design as a significant design parameter. So you told 2 point of views, right? From agentic is one from the agent side of the view of the APIs are viewed, and another one is the role of APIs, right? What we have, like a lot of customers already built hundreds and thousands of APIs, right? So one thing I came up is that the life cycle of the API is reducing with this
Yes.
one, and the number of API is going to increase from my conversation with Ajay previously. So in this point of view, how do you see they have to increase the speed of the life cycle of the API?
Yeah. That's a very interesting question. We have a large customer, I won't name names on the podcast, but a large customer that came up to us about 3 years ago. I've been a customer for a while, talking about a scenario with API sprawl. Basically, we have so many APIs in our ecosystem that we have lost count. C4E, a lot of your listeners would be familiar with the concept of C4E, where you empower your shadow IT and line of business IT to build their own APIs. The toolset made building of APIs so simple that everyone was empowered to build their own APIs. And I'll come to the AI part in a short bit, but I think the analogy is probably going to be helpful. This led to a scenario where we ended up with a huge API sprawl scenario where same API capability existed at multiple places in the organization. Sometimes within the same part of the organization, someone just came up with an API because they didn't do a good job at discovering APIs. It can be extremely dangerous, it can be extremely cost prohibitive, and it doesn't help from an InfoSec perspective as well. We are at a similar situation with AI toolset as well. We are starting to see AI sprawl becoming a big problem as well, or agentic sprawl is what they're calling, becoming a big problem as well. It is also making the API sprawl much worse, is because tools like Cursor, tools like Windsurf, they can help you build APIs for someone who doesn't know the A of APIs, build APIs within minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So the life cycle, you're very right, with the new toolset also has become even narrower, much faster. What would help in situations like these is some sort of guardrails. And these guardrails, while AI is the cause of the problem, so tools like Cursor and Windsurf, while they help our development community, even VS Code itself with Anypoint Code Builder, helps our development community build things in minutes, which becomes part of the problem or side effect of the solution. AI can also help you solve for it. What some of our larger customers have been doing is a two-pronged process. When a new API is created, and from the API lifecycle perspective, an API is checked in to the version control using different AI models, our customers are able to look at duplication of capabilities. While a human being might not be able to go through a catalog of 10,000 APIs and figure out which API provides what functionality and is the new API added to my catalog a repeat of certain existing functionality, I think GenAI does a much faster job and a much better job at doing that. The first guardrail that you can see being put together is when a new API is published, your GenAI features and capabilities have the ability to scan through your and scour through your API catalog and figure out where the duplicate functionalities are and maybe stop Shadow IT from publishing APIs that might already exist. So we don't want to elongate the API lifecycle. We still want the idea is, fail fast, build fast, and then fail fast as well, right? However, we want guardrails. The guardrails we enforce by just stopping API deployment to happen when repeated functionalities happen. So this helps as far as greenfield new APIs are concerned. Now, a lot of our customers, what they've also been doing is using tools like NoName. Sequence is another great player in the space, Sequence.ai. They are also using Traceable to essentially identify APIs that are invoking same or similar endpoints and then building heuristics on top of it. So as far as if you already are in a situation where there are too many APIs to manage, tools like Sequence, Traceable, NoName, they're going to help you solve for figuring out which APIs have similar functionality so that you can go through this entire wider exercise. Of course, you need the right set of partners to help you support that exercise. If you were to do it by yourself, brute force, that would lead to unintended consequences. That this needs to be a program. But using a program like that can help you shrink your current API sprawl as well. So I agree with your initial assertion that it can make the problem worse. The AI and the Gen AI toolset can make API landscape and API complexity and API sprawl problem worse. But I would argue that the solution is not elongating the API lifecycle. I would argue that the solution is using AI to put guardrails to A, avoid deployments of duplicate capabilities, and B, using some sort of sanitation to clean up the house as far as the current API sprawl is concerned.
Things we need to consider. Coming back to the product side of the things, so you told a lot of things are happening from agent to agent orchestration from a MuleSoft point of view, and also at Connect.ai event in New York, I saw about this agent orchestration, human in the loop. So many new concepts and things got introduced. Can you talk a little more about from a product point of view, how are some of the new features came in and what are some of the things in the roadmap that are exciting for the practitioners?
Yeah, Ajay, I think great question. So there are two broad streams from a product perspective that we are looking at as far as effective use of agentic and generative AI is concerned. So the first set of tool set or the first set of use cases that we are looking at are focused around making our developers, so people who do development in MuleSoft, their experience, the DevOps teams, the operation teams, their experience with the MuleSoft platform easier, faster, etc. Some of the work that we have already done, I think we touched upon it at a high level in the beginning. MuleSoft's IDE, so the studio that we all love so much, is now available, or the development experience is now available inside tools like Cursor and Windsurf. Modern developers love vibe coding. I think vibe coding has become a phenomena where you code not based on syntax, you code based on vibes, and then you find outcomes that are more suitable to what you want to do rather than fixating on the syntax. Since MuleSoft is part of now this wider development ecosystem as well as the wider toolset enabled by Cursor or Windsurf, vibe coding becomes of MuleSoft toolset becomes significantly easier. So our wider dev ecosystem does not need to be obsessed with how to write a data view script. They don't need to be obsessed with how to write a session variable or a flow variable. A large part of it would automatically be figured out by. So that's one. Similarly, on the DevOps side, all the capabilities that you see on the DevOps side, including creating of mule assets, publishing of mule assets, discovering mule assets, all of that has become available as MCP tools. So while we help our customers expose MCP tools, the Mule platform itself has become available as an MCP tool. So if there was a person writing DevOps pipeline, they don't need to no longer need to figure out what the CLI command would be to deploy a Mule app, or they wouldn't need to spend time figuring out what Maven Clean Deploy, for example, from back in the world was. They would be able to use effective MCP tools to write their development pipelines as well.
Wow.
Similar capabilities have now been put together are in the process on the roadmap of being put together on things like anypoint monitoring, on things like our observability stack to help simplify and make observability on the Mule platform much easier as well from an agentic perspective. So that's the first family of feature is making the lives of our developers, DevOps, operations community easier as far as usage of Mule platform is concerned.
Okay.
So that's the first family. Some of it has already been released. So support for Windsurf and Cursor, for example, along with Tray is already out. The DevOps stuff that I was talking about, the MCP stuff that is already out, things like anypoint monitoring and improvement to monitoring stack using agents, that kind of stuff is currently on the roadmap. So that's the first family. The second family is helping our customers build agents. So not only do we make our customers' job easier, but we actually help them build agents and publish agents more effectively in conjunction with Salesforce. In that effect, a few key concepts that are getting released. Agent registry is going to be out pretty soon. Agent registry is going to be a singular place where you would be able to publish all of your agents so that other agents or human beings can seamlessly discover them. Agentic orchestration layer or agentic fabric, synonymously whatever we are calling it, is on the roadmap as well. That's going to come out relatively soon too, which is going to actually figure out which agent to invoke at what point of time. Additionally to that, MCP is already out. MCP as a part of Anypoint is already out, so MCP listeners can be used to expose your APIs as MCP tools. A2A capabilities are already released, so if you want to do agentic weaving or agentic fabric, A2A capabilities are already out as well. Corresponding to that, on the Flex side, MCP and A2A policies are out too. So for example, if an agent invoked an API and the API was surfacing PII, which you wanted to suppress, you don't want to make PII available. Those kind of policy management stuff, when an MCP tool is invoked to suppress a PII or do rate limiting or do throttling, those kind of stuff for MCP and A2A are out as well. So from a future roadmap perspective, MCP and A2A is already released, and agentic fabric as well as agentic orchestration layer is something that, along with agent registry, is something that would be released in near future.
Okay, sounds good. uh, I'm running out of time, but I have two last questions. I really want to pick your brain. One thing you talked about observability, that is something of very fascinating, because so far what I've seen is most of the projects we depend upon the external observability tools. So are you going in the direction of having MuleSoft platform level observability itself? Second thing, is it going to play a role? Like you said, audit and logging is very critical from agent to agent communication. Is this observability is going to play a role in transferring the context from one agent to another agent?
Great question. Now, as far as us being able to play with other observability toolset, primarily from an integration perspective, look, Ajay, that flexibility we intentionally gave. A lot of our customers use other tools in addition to MuleSoft. For example, they will have their own database servers, they might have their own file servers, web servers, etc. MuleSoft wants to make sure that wherever these other systems are traced, MuleSoft is traceable there as well. With that in mind, we built OTel, Open Telemetry, connectivity mechanism for MuleSoft to extract all the information outside. If a customer chooses that from an API or an integration perspective, if they want to use external tools, that option is always going to remain open. However, we have realized that As far as this wider industry is concerned, there are not many agent observability tools that even exist in the ecosystem at this point of time, which has made us honestly believe that it is a good opportunity for us to start investing even more heavily into the observability stack and observability toolset, is because that is going to empower us to open an entirely new area where agentic observability becomes easier to. As a side effect, of course, we'll do our app observability better as well, but primarily focus is to make agent observability more seamless, which Mule platform will allow us to do, and as a side effect, we'll do app observability effectively too. So to answer your question, as far as apps are concerned, we will continue to support things like open telemetry so that you can move information outside and you can seamlessly use external tools. But we are also going to provide agentic capability within our observability toolset so that both app and agent observability becomes easier and seamless.
Sounds good. One last question is, we are closely working on some of these legacy modernization, app rationalization initiatives along with the QueryTech. So what's your take on what you're seeing currently? And I see that I get surprised sometimes, kind of legacy platforms and the app still sitting out there. This will feels like it will impact a lot if they have to adapt to the AI. So what kind of discussions are you seeing and what kind of success are you seeing?
It's amazing. Legacy modernization in the last year or so, and this is, Gen AI has been an accelerator, but outside of Gen AI too, there are a few things that are happening in the industry, and we need to keep our ears and eyes open to that. A lot of traditional integration tool set, a lot of them are reaching a phase where they have been acquired by organizations that are not primarily focused on doing integration as effectively. They care about the IP or the customers, but well, they care about the customers, not so much about the IP. A lot of these traditional integration platforms have either defined end of life roadmaps for the legacy integration tools or are in process of defining end of life roadmap. What we also know for a fact that these bespoke legacy integration tools are not innovating at all. They were great when they were put together, but they have chosen for strategic or financial or commercial whatever reasons to not innovate at this point of time. That has given us a unique opportunity to reach out to our customers and create a coherent narrative around how a quickly and rapidly innovating integration tool set can come in. The work that you guys, Pravis, primarily with QueryTech has been doing is phenomenal. I've seen with some of the work that you've done, even the scoping of work, understanding legacy TIBCO or BizTalk code. Um, Coming from TIBCO, working with a large TIBCO retail enterprise, knowing how deeply pervasive TIBCO is on their side, also knowing the fact that a lot of people who did the TIBCO development are no longer in that role. A lot of them are at MuleSoft now doing MuleSoft code. It would virtually take us months, not days, not weeks, but months to understand even the scope of work. The work that your teams along with QueryTech have been doing has shortened that month's time frame into days effectively. The migration timelines themselves, multi-year migrations have become a couple of month-long exercises. That kind of velocity is unimaginable. It eliminates the need for an SME, a system expert who knows TIBCO in and out. It eliminates elongated life cycle where even if you have TIBCO SME, full-time job is to do the conversion, and it just accelerates things dramatically. So there is an industry opportunity that has arisen because in the last year or two, a lot of these legacy platforms are coming end of life, and customers need acceleration. By 2027, they need to be off of the legacy tool set. And then at the same time, you guys coming together with QueryTech to be able to create a pathway that would help them move effectively in a short time frame using Gen AI toolset in a secured fashion has been a godsend for us.
Thanks so much, Sumit, for all the support. I think one final question or thought, anything I missed or anything, because a lot of our practitioners are API professionals. Anything you like to share, final thought before we end?
Ajay, just a general advice for our API practitioners is, start to dabble into vibe coding. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Mule with vibe coding and the API development life cycle now has shrunk so much that it's going to be a very interesting area. The platform still is going to be necessary. You cannot wipe code, or you should not wipe code to build an observability platform. You should wipe code to move data from NetSuite to Salesforce. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So for our wider API ecosystem, start exploring tools like Cursor, like Windsurf, and start rapid prototyping. It's going to add a lot of value. This is where the industry is headed based on the best of our knowledge, and this is what's going to be powerful to our wider API ecosystem.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Sumit. Thanks for your time,
Thanks,
and
Ajay.
looking forward to work with you.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of AI Meets API. Thanks for tuning in and being part of the conversation. Be sure to follow so you don't miss future episodes. Until next time, stay curious and stay connected.